You ever feel like the place you loved most in the world wasn't just a house, but a part of your soul? That was my childhood home. It wasn't big or flashy. The roof leaked every monsoon season. The paint peeled off in chunks if you leaned on the wrong wall, and the front gate creaked like a haunted door. But to me, it was magic. It held the laughter of birthdays, the silence of late-night studying, the smell of Mom's weekend cooking, and the tears no one saw when I didn't make the volleyball team. It was more than bricks and wood. It was us. I was the youngest of three. Aria, my sister, was 2 years older, and Damien, our big brother, was the golden child. Naturally, he got the only room with a door that closed all the way. I shared mine with Aria, even when we were both too old to share. She had her side, I had mine. She drew a line with masking tape down the middle when we were 11, and I swear it stayed there until we were 18. Our family wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. There were fights, icy dinners, favoritism, long silences. But for some reason, I still believed we were held together by love. That no matter what, we'd stick. I thought love was enough to make things last. And then I found out the hard way it's not. Ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of seeing the world. I wanted to go places, learn how cities worked, how people built lives in corners of the earth I only saw in magazines. When I got a scholarship to study abroad in Denmark, engineering and urban design, full ride, I cried. I mean, full-on sobbed on the kitchen floor. It was validation. It was my dream. I thought my family would feel that joy too. They smiled. They hugged me. Dad even gave me a stiff high five and said, "Our little globe-trotter." But something about their excitement felt off, like it was rehearsed. Like they weren't proud. I don't know, maybe just relieved I was leaving. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining things, that I was just nervous to leave. When the day finally came, Mom helped me pack barely. Aria stayed in her room the whole morning. Damien tossed me a used power bank at the airport and said, "Try not to get robbed over there." I laughed it off, hugged them all anyway. Even when Mom barely looked me in the eyes as she told me, "Don't go over there and forget who you are." I took it as a blessing. I should have heard it for what it was, a warning. Denmark was beautiful, cold and unfamiliar, but in the best way. I threw myself into my classes, worked odd jobs, and networked like crazy. I was learning how to design entire neighborhoods, how to make cities efficient and livable. I was building my future. I thought I was making them proud. I called when I could, texted regularly. Sometimes they answered, sometimes not. I chalked it up to the time difference. Life, I figured. They were probably busy. But then one morning, just as spring was starting and the city was waking up from its long winter sleep, I got a message that punched me in the chest. It was from Mrs. Clark, our old neighbor. She'd been like an aunt to me growing up. "Sweetheart," the message read, "I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to ask, was it really okay for your parents to sell the house? The new owners said they bought it fair and square. But I thought you'd want to say goodbye first." I froze. Sold? Sell the house? Our house? No one had told me anything. Not a word. No heads up. No conversation. Not even a cold text. I called my mother. No answer. Tried Dad. Voicemail. Texted the family group chat, dead silent. I stared at that message for hours, trying to make sense of it. Had I misunderstood? Could it be a mistake? Maybe she meant a different house. I wish that were true. I didn't sleep much that week. I emailed my professors to say I had a family emergency. I didn't even know how I'd afford the flight. But I didn't care. I had to see it with my own eyes. When the cab dropped me off on our street, my stomach twisted in knots. I could barely breathe as we turned the corner. And there it was, fresh paint. New curtains. Different flowers in the garden. A white SUV in the driveway. I stepped out of the car slowly, walked up to the gate, and rang the bell. A man opened the door, holding a baby on his hip. His eyes were kind but confused. "Can I help you?" I looked at him, unable to speak for a second. I used to live here. I finally managed. He smiled politely. "Oh, are you Zara? The sellers mentioned a daughter who was away. Said you were off somewhere in Europe. Didn't seem like you were involved in the sale. Didn't seem like I was involved." I turned away before I burst into tears. I didn't want to break down in front of strangers. I walked 3 houses down, sat on the curb, and cried into my scarf. It didn't make sense. Why would they sell the house without telling me? Why wouldn't they say anything? That evening, I went to see them. I didn't call ahead. When I walked through the front door of my aunt's house, where they were all staying now, nobody looked surprised. Not one of them. Not even a blink. Mom crossed her arms. "You're back early." I asked her why they sold the house. "We needed the money," she said flatly. "You weren't using it. You didn't even ask about it." I was studying. "I called every week." She shrugged. "You left. We figured you were starting a new life." Aria rolled her eyes. "You always acted like you were better than us anyway." Dad chimed in. "We raised you. Don't act like you're owed anything." I asked where I was supposed to go. They laughed. Literally laughed. "You're the genius," Aria said. "Go figure it out." And just like that, I was out. No room. No apology. No home. I walked back out with nothing but my suitcase. Sat on a bench near the gas station that hadn't changed since I was 12. And I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. But here's the thing about me. They thought they knew who I was. They thought I was the same girl who once cried because she lost a school debate. That they didn't know who I had become. Because while they were counting me out, I was about to make a comeback they'd never forget. They sold my childhood home. FINE. Was going to buy the whole damn neighborhood. Asterisk. I didn't sleep that first night back. I lay curled on the tiny couch at Maya's apartment, clutching a borrowed blanket and staring at the ceiling like it might open up and offer answers. Maya had been my best friend since high school, the kind of person who didn't need explanations. I texted her after leaving my family's house, and she just replied, "Come." No questions, no judgment. Just a warm hug and leftovers from the fridge. "You're staying as long as you need," she whispered that night. I nodded, too stunned to speak. My family had cut me off. My childhood home, the only place that ever made sense, was gone. Sold. Scrubbed clean of every trace of me. And worst of all, they didn't even feel sorry. The next morning I sat at Maya's kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, and tried to process everything. They really did it. They sold the house, and not just any house. The one that held every Christmas memory, every scraped knee, every secret note passed under the dinner table. It was gone. And so was I, in their eyes. "They didn't just sell property," I whispered. "They erased me." Maya reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then you erased them right back." I laughed through the ache in my chest. "With what, Maya? I've got a student visa. No permanent job. No savings." "You've got brains," she cut in. "You've got fire. And you've got me. You're not alone." That moment changed everything. Not because I suddenly believed I could do it, but because I realized I had to. Over the next week, I went back to Denmark. But I wasn't the same girl who left. I walked through campus like a ghost. My eyes were hollow, but my mind was burning. I knew now nothing was promised. Not family. Not love. Not home. But if I could build something once, I could build it again. So I got to work. I turned my pain into a checklist. Step 1. Finish my thesis. Step 2. Get freelance clients. Step 3. Save like hell. Step 4. Find the cracks in the system and slide through them. I pitched myself to everyone's startups, local governments, design firms. I offered consultations for urban projects and housing. Solutions. I made presentations in coffee shops. Slept 4 hours a night. Learned code on the train. And slowly, the money started to trickle in. Then flow. Then surge. One of my side projects, a modular housing concept using AI generated community design, caught the attention of a green tech investor in the Netherlands. They flew me out. I pitched like my life depended on it. Because it did. Offered funding, equity, a place at the table, shook their hands with tears in my eyes and fire in my gut. I wasn't just back. I was becoming something bigger than they could ever imagine. But revenge, that didn't come right away. It sat quietly in the background, like a shadow, waiting for the right moment. At first, I just wanted to forget them. Erase them from my heart, the way they erased me from theirs. But then I got a letter. Well, it was an email, technically, from my old bank back home. It said, "Hi Zara. Just a note, your name was removed as a co-owner on the original mortgage 3 days before the property was sold. The request came directly from your father. We apologize for not confirming this with you earlier. If this is an error, please contact our office." 3 days before the sale. 3 days. They had waited until the very last moment to scrub me out like a final insult. A deliberate cut. That was when the anger returned. Cold, clear, focused. And suddenly, I didn't want to forget anymore. I wanted to remember everything. I wanted to buy the world they thought they owned. 6 months later, I flew back again. This time, not with a suitcase full of fear, but with a briefcase full of capital. A plan. A mission. I stood in front of the same house, my old house, and smiled. The paint had already started chipping again. The flowers were dying in the heat. The driveway had cracks. The neighborhood was struggling. Half the homes had foreclosure signs. Others were rotting under absentee landlords. But I didn't see decay. I saw opportunity. I saw the cracks in the system I could build through. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about legacy. I started making calls. 3 weeks later, I bought my first house 2 blocks away from the one I grew up in. It was abandoned, water damaged, boarded up. I paid cash. Then I bought another, and another. I made LLCs. Quiet, simple shell companies. No names, no headlines. I renovated them with sustainable materials, recruited young tradespeople, paid them fairly, created jobs, rebuilt the community. Then I started leasing them to good people, young families, students, retired folks who'd been priced out of better areas. They didn't know who owned the buildings. No one did, not yet, that they'd find out. And when they did, they'd never forget. **** Every time I walked down that cracked sidewalk, past the house that used to be mine, past the smell of fried onions from the corner shop, past Mrs. Clark's garden with her little wind chimes tinkling in the breeze, I reminded myself why I started. They sold me out. They turned their backs on me and never looked back. But now, I was walking back quietly, invisibly, and this time, I wasn't the girl begging for space on a couch. I was the woman with a vision. First, the houses came slowly. I only had enough capital for 3 properties in the first round, 2 abandoned homes and 1 mid-sized duplex that had been vacant for 6 months. I worked with what I had. I partnered with a few local contractors, folks who had been burned by bad developers or were just struggling to find consistent work. I offered something no one else was offering: respect and a cut of the project. Word got around fast. We cleaned up graffiti-stained walls, cleared yards that had turned into mini forests, and brought color back to those broken homes. We didn't just paint over the past. We reimagined it. I was intentional. I made sure our rentals had charm and warmth. The kind of places people felt safe in. No one knew I owned them. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't even use my real name on the paperwork. I had companies set up: ZLN Holdings, Terrorize, Rehome & Co. All faceless, quiet little names that couldn't be traced to me without some digging. The funny part? My family still lived just 5 streets over. Still struggling. Still unaware. They had no idea that the girl they cut loose was becoming the backbone of their neighborhood. About 9 months into the rebuild, I visited the grocery store near our old house, just for some coffee and fruit. But the moment I turned into the next aisle, I stopped short. There they were: Mom, Aria, Damien, huddled near the discount rack, whispering over the cheapest bags of rice. My heart twisted. Not because I wanted to give them, but because they looked faded. Not the same booming voices and cold stares. Just ... tired people barely holding on. They hadn't noticed me yet. So I turned and walked the other way, keeping my head low, my hoodie up. Later I asked around quietly. Maya helped. She still lived nearby and knew people who knew people. Turned out, the money they got from selling the house hadn't lasted long. They made a few big purchases early on: new car, TV, a few fancy nights out, and then the well dried up. Damien had lost his job. Aria had dropped out of her nursing program. Mom's health was declining, and Dad, well, no one had seen him in months. They were falling apart. And I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. A few weeks later, I made another investment, this time in a long-vacant commercial space. It used to be a laundromat. The roof was gone, the walls bowed out like broken ribs. But I saw potential. We turned it into a co-working hub with childcare in the back. Called it Root Space. It became an anchor for single mothers, remote workers, creatives who'd been priced out of downtown. People came. They built businesses. They grew together. And my holdings grew too. One by one, I bought up the street. Old landlords were eager to sell. The place had been dying for years. No one saw the value. No one except me. Some houses I rented. Others, I flipped and resold to young buyers who wanted to start fresh. Then came the twist I never expected. A woman named Tasha showed up at one of our open houses. She looked nervous, clutching a folder with income papers and glowing references. Had 2 boys and a quiet energy that reminded me of myself 10 years ago. After the showing, she pulled the leasing manager aside and whispered, "Do you think the landlord would be okay with my cousin co-signing? I don't want to lose this place. I really need to get out of where we're staying now." The leasing manager nodded. "Of course, we'll work with you. You'll just need to give us their name for the paperwork." Tasha sighed, then said something I never expected. "It's my cousin Damien. He's kind of a mess, but he's blood. He owes me. I hope that won't be a problem." I felt my stomach clench. My brother. The same one who smirked when I begged for a place to sleep. The same one who said I should figure it out. Now co-signing for a rental that I owned. I didn't say anything, of course. I signed off on the lease approval like it was any other file. I made sure she got a discounted rate. Quietly, behind the scenes. She had no idea the landlord she was thanking on the phone through a property manager was the same girl who used to scrub blood from scraped knees on the old porch steps too. Blocks over. That night, I stood across the street from the house, watching them move in. 2 little boys laughing as they ran around the yard. And my brother damaged, slower, quieter, carrying boxes like a man who had lost his shine. He never saw me, but I saw him, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt complete. Because this was the power they said I didn't have. The girl who they abandoned, now deciding the price of their rent. Asterisk, asterisk. The funny thing about revenge is that it doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, through the side door. It doesn't shout. It whispers. You're in control now. That's what it felt like when I realized my family, who once thought I was disposable, was now living under a roof. I owned and they had no clue. It had been nearly a year since I'd stood crying on that curb, looking at strangers living in the house where I learned to ride a bike. Now, I was the one deciding what families moved in and what buildings got saved. I wasn't just buying houses. I was building a legacy. I called the project Lotus District. Lotus because it rises from the mud, unbothered by the filth around it. I didn't want to just take over the neighborhood. I wanted to heal it. Every month we expanded. With the help of a young, hungry architect team I met during my final semester in Denmark, I designed spaces that breathed. Eco-friendly homes, rooftop gardens, play areas between duplexes. We didn't call it gentrification. We called it restoration. Because we didn't push people out. We invited the forgotten back in. Families that had once been displaced returned. Retired teachers, old neighbors, even a few of my childhood classmates reached out for affordable housing. I helped every one of them. Everyone except my family. About 15 months into the project, we opened a small corner market that sourced from local farmers. I attended the ribbon cutting in disguise, hoodie up, sunglasses on, not because I was hiding from the community, but because I didn't want my family to recognize me yet. It wasn't time. Not until everything was ready. I watched from across the street as Aria entered the store with a toddler on her hip. Wait. A toddler? My jaw tightened. She had a baby? Since when? She looked tired, no makeup, shadows under her eyes. And yet she still walked with that same proud tilt of the chin. She didn't recognize me. She walked right past me, murmuring to the cashier that she was so glad this neighborhood was finally turning around. I laughed under my breath. It was turning around. Because of me. Asterisk, asterisk. That same week, a local journalist contacted Rootspace to interview the woman behind the Lotus District. They didn't know who I was. Just that someone quiet, strategic, and young had been buying and rebuilding nearly a third of the neighborhood in under 2 years. I politely declined the interview. Not yet. The moment I went public, the mask would come off. And I wasn't ready to be seen by them, until I had everything. In the middle of our third expansion phase, something surprising happened. My mother applied to live in one of the units. She used her maiden name. Her application came through just like any other, neatly filled out, with medical documentation attached and a sad little note at the bottom that read, "Please consider reduced rent. I'm disabled and living off a fixed income. My daughter no longer supports us." I stared at that line for a long time. My daughter no longer supports us. It was incredible how quickly she erased me when I didn't serve her narrative. When I left for school, she cut the cord. Now, I was supposed to feel guilty. No, not this time. flagged her application personally, approved it, and lowered the rent by 35%. Then I added a condition in the lease: mandatory attendance at monthly community meetings. If she was going to live in the new neighborhood, she was going to see me rebuild it, piece by piece. The first time she walked into a Lotus community meeting, she didn't notice me at first. I was sitting in the back, in a blazer and slacks, pretending to take notes. The woman who stood at the front, a young housing director I hired, greeted everyone and began sharing updates. She showed photos of the restored blocks, listed upcoming initiatives, then said, "And now, I'd like to introduce the mind behind Lotus District, the woman who made this all possible. Please welcome Zara." Nassim, you could have heard a pin drop. I stood up, took off my blazer, straightened my spine, and walked slowly to the front. My mum was frozen in her seat. Her eyes locked with mine, then widened, then dropped. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I spoke directly to the audience. "I left this neighborhood once," I began. "When I returned, it had been gutted. But I came back with the intention to rebuild, not for vengeance, for justice, for people who deserved better. We are not just building homes, we are rebuilding lives." The room erupted in applause, except for the woman who birthed me. She stared at her shoes, then at her hands, then at the exit. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Asterisk. After the meeting, the room buzzed with energy. Community members clapped me on the back. Others asked questions about the next development phases, and some just stood quietly with tears in their eyes. I thanked them all with grace. But my focus was on the woman trying to disappear into the crowd. My mother moved fast, grabbing her tote, clutching her paperwork to her chest like a shield. She didn't even wait for the handshake line. She was halfway to the parking lot by the time I slipped out the side door to intercept her. "Leaving so soon, Mom?" I said, quietly. She flinched, turned around slowly, like she'd seen a ghost. "You," she whispered. "I told you I'd figure it out," I replied. She didn't speak for a long moment, just stood there, blinking like the sun was too bright. I didn't know it was you." "No, you didn't care to ask." She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked at the cars like she was checking for someone to save her from the moment. "You own all of this." I nodded. "Most of it. Some of it's still in progress." She stared at the sidewalk. "I didn't know you had that kind of money. That's what happens when people believe in you, and you stop believing in them." I could have said more. Could have listed every cruel word she'd said the night I came home. Every silence that screamed louder than her voice. Ever could. But I didn't. She wasn't worth it. "I lowered your rent," I added, "because I'm not like you." Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the shadow of the community I built. The weeks that followed were strange. Word spread fast. Not about the family drama. I had enough sense to keep those details buried. But about me. People found out I was the woman behind Lotus. That the same girl who used to sell lemonade on Maple Street had returned as a developer, an investor, a community leader. Some were proud, some were confused, and others, well, they crawled back like ants to honey. Damien sent an email. Short and awkward. "Hey, didn't realize that was you at the meeting. Was hoping we could catch up. Coffee maybe? Let me know." I didn't reply. Aria showed up to a panel I spoke at 2 weeks later. Sat in the back, arms crossed, pretending not to care. But I saw the way she watched me. Watched how people listened to me. The same girl she used to call irrelevant in front of her friends now commanding a room full of architects and officials. Poetic, isn't it? Then came the phone call that nearly made me laugh out loud. It was the leasing manager from one of my largest complexes. "Hey, Zara," she said. "Got a couple here looking to apply. They're older. Husband's recovering from a stroke. Income's tight, but their paperwork checks out. Only thing is," she hesitated. I raised an eyebrow. "Only thing?" "Well, it's your father." I froze. "Excuse me?" "The name on the application, Mohammed Nassim. And the co-applicant is your mom." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. Of course it would. Come full circle like this. They had nowhere else to go. They'd burned through everything. And now, unknowingly, they were applying for housing in the very district they sold out from under me. They didn't know I owned the building. They just knew rent was reasonable, the units were clean, and the wait list was short. I told the leasing manager to approve them, but with a condition. "Which is?" she asked. I smiled. "They need to attend the monthly Legacy Builders brunch." "Is that the one where you speak at the end?" "Yep, every time." When they moved in, I didn't say anything, didn't visit, didn't gloat. I let them settle into their small 2-bedroom unit with a view of the park I personally designed. The one with the statue at the center, a bronze lotus blooming from concrete. They must have walked past it every day. And if they looked closely, they'd see the little inscription at the bottom. "She bloomed because she didn't know she was buried." That was for me. And every girl who was ever told she'd never be enough. I started seeing them around town. At the cafe inside Root Space. At the community pantry. At the art walk on Saturdays. Sometimes Mom looked away when she saw me. Sometimes she gave me a weak nod. Once Aria tried to wave. I ignored her. Because this wasn't about rage anymore. It wasn't about payback. It was about peace. I had mine. Then they were now paying rent month after month to a daughter they once discarded. I think that's justice enough. But one thing still lingered. The house. My house. The one that started it all. The only property I hadn't touched. Until now. Asterisk, I saved it for last. That house. The one that was never just wood and concrete. It was memories. It was childhood. It was betrayal in the shape of a porch swing. I avoided walking past it for almost 2 years, even as I bought up every other building around it. Even as I rebuilt playgrounds and repainted curbs and launched initiatives that made the news. That house, it stayed untouched, because the pain still lived there. But all wounds demand closure. So, I finally asked my agent to find out who owned it now. Turns out, the couple who bought it from my parents had fallen on hard times. He'd lost his job. She'd gotten sick. And the bank was moving in. Foreclosure. They were desperate to sell before they lost everything. And just like that, the door opened. I bought it quietly. No fanfare, no celebration. I walked through it like a ghost retracing her old footsteps. The front door still had the faint scratch from when I crashed my bike into it. The hallway still creaked at the 4th step. The backyard fence still leaned to the left, just like it did when I was 9, and tried to climb over it to escape chores. It was mine again. But it didn't feel like home. Not anymore. It felt like a monument. To everything I lost. To everything I became. So I made a decision. Not to live in it. Not to flip it, but to turn it into something bigger. I hired a preservationist team, rebuilt it from the foundation up, keeping the bones but breathing new life into the structure. Then I opened it as the Lotus Women's Resource Center, A space for young women who were starting over, who had no family, no support. Just a dream and a fight. We offered free housing for 6 months, career coaching, therapy, and seed funding for small businesses. And right above the entrance, I had a plaque installed. For the girls who were told to go figure it out. May you never walk alone again. It became the heart of the district. And the one story the press wouldn't stop talking about. That was when the invitations started rolling in .podcasts.tv panels, .magazines, .everyone wanted to talk to the young mogul who turned a family betrayal into a real estate empire. I ignored most of them. Until one caught my eye. Legacy and Lineage. A celebration of women who rebuilt themselves. It was a charity gala. Black tie. Hosted in the city's biggest hall. Sold out. They wanted me to be the keynote speaker. And I said yes. The night of the event, I wore white. Not because I wanted to look angelic, but because I wanted to remind myself how clean you can be after walking through filth and still coming out whole. The room sparkled with chandeliers and soft jazz. People in gowns. Cameras flashing. Champagne flutes clinking. And right before I stepped on stage, I saw them. My family. Sitting at one of the sponsored tables near the front. Their name tags didn't lie. Nassim family. Donated. What? To buy a seat at the table? Or maybe, just maybe, to try and rewrite their part in the story. My story. Stepped up to the mic, took a deep breath, and smiled. Good evening, I began. Tonight isn't about revenge. It's about rebirth. It's about the women who have been told they are too much, too ambitious, or too difficult. The women who were told their dreams didn't fit inside 4 walls. I paused. Let the silence breathe. When I left my home, I thought I was chasing success. But what I was really chasing was freedom. From silence. From shame. From people who only love you when you stay small. People clapped. Some nodded. My mother shifted uncomfortably. I was sold out, I said. But I bought myself back. Piece by piece. Block by block. And now, the very soil that once buried me is growing something new. I looked directly at them. Sometimes, family is the first place you learn heartbreak. And sometimes, it's the reason you learn to build your own. After the speech, people lined up to hug me. Thank me. Cry in front of me. My family stayed. Seated. When I finally walked past their table, Mum stood up. She looked smaller now. Not physically. Just less. I didn't know what I was doing, she said softly. I didn't stop. Didn't smile. Didn't argue. I just said, neither. Did the first, but I learned. And kept walking. That night, I went back to the house. To the Lotus Center. I sat on the porch steps with a warm cup of tea. And watched the sunrise light up the street. The same street that once swallowed me whole. Now glowing under everything I built. Not with revenge. But with power. The soft kind. The steady kind. The kind that lasts. You'd think once the curtain lifts, once the world sees who you really are, what you've really done, the ghosts would vanish. That all the pain, the betrayal, the bitter roots would dissolve under applause and admiration. But ghosts don't leave, just because you've outgrown them. They linger, and mine wore my last name. A week after the gala, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. An actual handwritten letter. Slid under the door of the Lotus Center like a secret. The envelope was worn. The handwriting shaky. To Zara from Mum. I stared at it for a while. Felt the familiar burn behind my eyes. Not anger this time, just exhaustion. Because I knew what it would be. Some twisted apology. Some plea. Some version of "we didn't know better." I opened it anyway. Inside were 5 pages, neatly written, carefully worded, and every sentence dripped with something I couldn't quite place. Shame, guilt, regret, or just fear of being left behind. She talked about her health, about how my father could no longer walk without a cane, about Aria's struggles raising her child alone, about how Damien drank too much and worked too little. Then she said it. "We thought you'd forget us, so we erased you before you could erase us." I read that line 3 times. And suddenly, I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't just cruelty. It was fear. They didn't throw me away because I failed them. They threw me away because I didn't, because I dared to want more than their version of love. I didn't respond to the letter. Some things deserve silence. But I did one thing. I had Maya deliver 3 envelopes. 1 to Damien, 1 to Aria, 1 to my parents. Each envelope contained a legal document. A severance, clean, professional, written by my attorney. A final separation of any financial or familial obligation. No debts owed, no payments pending, no support granted, but in each envelope was also a card. No logo, no signature, just one sentence. "This was the last thing you ever took from me. I've taken everything else back." And I meant it, because they had taken my peace. But I turned their betrayal into a blueprint. Into generational wealth, into community, into me. A few months passed. The seasons shifted. Lotus grew. We opened a youth coding center, a wellness cafe, a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name. And still, I stayed low. Let the neighborhood thrive without flashing my face on every corner. Until one day, I heard my name echo down the hallway of the community center. Zara? Zara Nassim. I turned. It was Aria. She looked thinner, older. Her hair pulled into a tired bun. Her child, maybe 3 or 4 years old, was tugging on her sleeve, asking for a snack. She looked at me like she hadn't rehearsed what to say. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said softly. I nodded. "I live here. I never left. Not really. I saw your center. It's beautiful." I gave her a tight smile. "It's for women who didn't have someone show up for them." She flinched at that. Then said, "I was jealous of how big you dreamed. And now, I'm just tired." She didn't ask for anything, not money, not help. Just stood there like someone on the edge of a river who didn't know how to swim. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally. I waited. Let the silence press in. "I know," I said, and I meant it. Because forgiveness doesn't mean rebuilding a bridge. Sometimes, it just means letting yourself walk across it. Alone. That evening, I sat in my office at the Lotus Center and looked at the wall of framed photos. Each one was a woman who came through the center and walked out changed. Stronger. Freer. One photo caught my eye. A girl named Imani, who arrived at 16 after being kicked out for loving the wrong person. Now, she was launching her own non-profit for queer teens. Another photo, Jess, an ex-convict who had done time for a crime she didn't commit. Now, she was our lead project manager. And then one space remained. An empty frame. I opened a drawer, pulled out a photo. Me, sitting on the porch steps at age 9. Ice cream in one hand. A notebook in the other. I slid it into the frame. Because this, too, was a kind of homecoming. Spring in the Lotus District wasn't like spring anywhere else. Here, it came with soft music from open windows, with chalk drawings on sidewalks, with neighbors who waved, smiled, and asked how your day was because they meant it. Here, community was not a buzzword. It was an inheritance. Every week we hosted coffee and conversations at the cafe beside the center. Women young and old came together to share, to teach, to vent, to dream. It became sacred. No judgments, no hierarchy, just space to breathe and belong. That morning I arrived early, opened the windows, put on the kettle, let the smell of roasted beans fill the room like comfort. Then I sat by the front window, flipping through grant proposals, when Maya slid in too. The seat across from me. "You know you've built something wild, right?" she said, sipping her iced coffee. "Like this is beyond a glow-up. This is an empire." I laughed. "Not an empire, a garden. I just make sure it doesn't get trampled." She leaned in, eyes gleaming. "Okay, fine. But let me ask you something." "What now?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've taken back the neighborhood. You've confronted your family. You've outgrown every limit they put on you. So, what do you want now?" Her question hit harder than I expected, because the truth was so much of what I'd done, built, and become, was rooted in a need to prove something, to survive betrayal, to make my name mean more than pity. But now I had peace. Now I had power. Now I had choices. And that was something I'd never really allowed myself to explore. "I want," I said slowly, "to make sure no girl ever starts the way I did. Alone. Erased." Maya smiled. "Then maybe it's time to start thinking bigger than this block." That evening, I sat at the kitchen table of my apartment, the one overlooking the very community I'd resurrected, and began writing a proposal. The Lotus Expansion Project. We'd partner with underdeveloped cities and offer consulting, funding, and community-led blueprints to replicate the Lotus model. Not a chain, not a franchise. A movement, rooted in healing, powered by women. I emailed it to my Denmark investor that night, attached a few reports, a few photos. By morning, I had a reply. "Let's fund this. Full scale. Global vision. We're all in." My heart stopped for a second. Then I smiled. This was no longer about the people who left me behind. This was about the people who would rise because I didn't. A few weeks later, the mayor's office contacted me. They wanted to honor me at a city ceremony, not just for my development work, but for creating the highest rated community housing model in the state. I almost declined, not because I was afraid of the spotlight, but because I didn't need it anymore. Still, something told me to go. And I'm glad I did. The event was held at City Hall. Banners waved in the wind, printed with purple lotuses and the words, "Honor, Hope, Her." I wore a soft beige pantsuit. Nothing dramatic, no jewels, just confidence. The room was full activists, educators, city officials, press. As I walked toward the podium, I caught a glimpse of someone near the back wall. Mom. Alone. She wasn't dressed for photos. She wasn't here to be seen. She was just watching. For the first time. Truly watching. I stepped up to the mic. Spoke about justice. About reimagining wealth. About the quiet war women fight just to exist with dignity. I didn't mention my family. But I looked right at her when I said, "We are not broken by who walks away. We are rebuilt by those who choose to stay. And most of all, by ourselves." People stood, clapped, cried, and I stood with them. Not above them. With them. Later that night, I sat on the front steps of the Lotus Center as the sun dipped low over the horizon. I pulled out a worn notebook, the same kind I used as a kid when I scribbled dreams no one believed in, and I began to write. Not a business plan, not a speech. A letter dot to the girl I used to be. Dear Zara, they tried to erase you, but you left roots, and now the world is blooming. I folded the paper, slipped it inside the front page of the center's orientation binder, and smiled. Let the next girl read it. Let her know it's possible. Because when they sold my childhood home, they thought they were taking everything, but what they really did was give me the world. Asterisk, asterisk. The days that followed the city ceremony were some of the busiest and most fulfilling of my life. Calls from new partners, invitations to speak, requests for collaboration came flooding in. Lotus District was no longer just a neighborhood. It was becoming a blueprint for change. But with growth came new challenges. Scaling a community isn't as simple as buying properties and fixing roofs. It requires trust, respect, and a delicate balance between honoring history and embracing the future. I spent countless hours meeting with local leaders in other cities, listening to their struggles, and sharing our story not as a lecture, but as a conversation. During one such trip, I was reminded of why I started in a small town. A woman approached me after a panel discussion. Your story, she said, voice trembling, reminds me of my daughter. She left home last year after years of being ignored and disrespected. She's trying to build a life, but it's hard. You've given me hope. I held her hands. That's why I do this, so no one has to feel erased. Back home, Lotus District continued to flourish. New businesses opened, bakeries, bookshops, co-ops, all rooted in community values. Children who once roamed empty streets now had parks to play in and mentors to look up to. And every month, the community meetings grew larger. The past was never forgotten, but it no longer controlled us. Meanwhile, the letters and occasional messages from my family had mostly stopped. They had retreated, perhaps accepting, or perhaps defeated. But I didn't seek reconciliation anymore. I sought peace. I found it in the faces of the women who walked through the Lotus Center's doors every day, ready to rewrite their own stories. One afternoon, as I prepared for another presentation, Maya called me with urgent news. Zara, you need to see this. She sent a link. It was an article titled, From Abandoned to Thriving: How One Woman's Vision is Changing the Face of Urban Renewal. The piece detailed Lotus District's transformation, highlighting me as the visionary leader. But what caught my eye was a quote from the mayor. Zara Nassim's work has not only revitalized a neighborhood but has sparked hope across the entire city. She embodies the resilience and strength of our community. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. This was more than I ever dreamed. That night, I stood on the balcony of the Lotus Center, looking out over the streets I had helped rebuild. Glow of porch lights, the hum of laughter, the soft rustle of leaves, it was a symphony of life. I thought about the girl who left home broken and scared, the woman who returned with nothing but determination, and the leader who now stood tall, unshaken. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destruction. It's in rising above. Asterisk, asterisk. The Lotus District had grown beyond anything I ever imagined. It was no longer just a place on the map, it was a movement, a sanctuary, a promise to every girl and woman who'd been told she wasn't enough. But for me, the journey wasn't over. Because true healing, true strength, comes when you make peace with your past. One quiet afternoon, I received a call from my brother Damien. I want to talk, he said, voice hesitant. I paused. For years I'd kept my distance. Forgiveness wasn't a given, but something in his voice, vulnerability, maybe made me say yes. We met at a small cafe in the heart of Lotus. He looked different, worn but trying. I've made a lot of mistakes, he admitted. I was angry and lost, but seeing what you've built, it made me want to do better. I nodded. That's the first step. We talked for hours about childhood, pain, regrets and dreams. And for the first time in years, I felt the possibility of a new kind of family. The next morning, I stood on the porch of the Lotus Women's Resource Center, watching the sun rise over the neighborhood. From the broken girl who left with nothing, to the woman who came back to build an empire, to the leader who changed a city's story, I realized this wasn't just my victory. It was ours. Because when they tried to erase me, they didn't know I was planting seeds. And those seeds grew. So, to every person watching this story, remember that pain is temporary, but power is forever. Your past does not define your future. You have the strength to rise, rebuild, and rewrite your story, no matter what anyone else says. Thank you for listening to my journey. This is Zara Nassim signing off. But never giving up. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watch till the end, please comment revenge, so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy. Asterisk.